Thank you everyone for being here. We have like only an hour, and I feel like any panel or any conversations we have, there's always so much to talk about. So we're gonna try to like dive into it. So today, my name is Rahi Hasan. I'm a filmmaker, impact producer. My connection to Full Frame actually goes way back from 2015. I was an intern with the Center for Doc Studies when I was connected, helping out with the festival. Then I was a fellow at CDS, then I was a full-time staff working with Full Frame, and then I was also leading the photography team. So there are so many different hats I have worn, and it's really amazing to be able to facilitate this conversation today at a festival that's home to me. So today we have three amazing panelists. All three of them are screening their films at the festival. I will pass it to them just to introduce themselves quickly, and then we'll get into the conversation.
Hello. Great, it's working. Hi everyone, my name is Vicky Du. I have my debut feature documentary premiering here actually in an hour at 4:30 for anyone who's interested and wants to go see it. And it's called Light of the Setting Sun. It's very personal. I'm really interested in like Asian American stories and the experience of diaspora, cultural belonging, home and identity. And so that's really what the film explores.
Hello? Okay, there we go. See, now I don't have to rap. You don't want that. So my name is MacArthur. I'm the director of Family Tree. I just want to give dap to my team who's here and some of the family members who hung out. It's a beautiful film about, just a family weaving their family life in with the management of their lands and passing that legacy down, and how they do it is through sustainable forestry. So really just trying to tie, a deep human connection to our land and, avenues and pathways to healing. So that's what I do.
Hello, my name is Tweel. I'm the director of The Bitter Pill here at the festival. It is a, thank you. It's a movie about a lawyer in a small town in West Virginia taking on big pharma and the opioid crisis. And it's a very complex legal story and character story sort of all wrapped in one. It's the 7th feature I've made, I think, and I try to focus on telling good character-based stories throughout the past almost 20 years of making docs.
Thank you so much. I do want to give 2 shout outs. So this panel was in co-production with Indie Media Arts South, which is a collective of independent filmmakers based in the South. So if anyone that's not part of it, if you want to join, let me know. Our website is imassouth.org, so you can join that way. I want to give a huge shout out to Rebecca Ferguson for initiating this panel, from that email to here, it's happening. So thank you so much. Okay, so I feel like today's conversation, the intention behind it is to kind of create space to reflect and talk about impact in documentary, and how that doesn't have to look in just one way, right? So we have here, Vicky's film is a personal documentary. If you all have seen Family Tree, Jennifer's film, is true family stories, all, kind of, I feel like it's going beyond family conversation into a community. Also, Clay's film, focuses on something much bigger topic. So how does, how do these films envision impact while the filmmakers kind of, stay true to their artistic vision, right? How do you balance that? How do you navigate that? And also, I think folks here are on different journeys in terms of whatever we like in the field, how we call like impact campaign and, you know, designing an impact for your film. So I know Jennifer is an OG in the field who has, you know, thought about impact and impact strategies way before it was a thing. I know Vicky, this is your first film and you haven't developed a campaign yet, but you were like thinking about it. Clea, we have also had conversations about your perspective on impact. So through this panel, we are trying to look at, you know, how impact looks for different genres of film, and when you are in different journey, like different place in your journey with impact. So I will start with one question. I'm gonna kind of go a little deep, and we talked about this a little bit, is that generally, in the last, I feel like 10 years in our field, impact, when you talk about impact campaign, it's always been something that comes in post-production, like after you have a rough cut. And a lot of like leaders in the field have been advocating for like funders to also fund impact campaigns, right? And so we don't usually have funding to like bring on an impact strategies or impact producer until sort of like tail end of the film. But I always think about that impact is something we need to think about in pre-production, right? How do we think about the framing of a story or a narrative where we're not centering product, but centering the participants and centering the impact of the film as we craft the story, right? So I'm curious for y'all's film, at what point did you think about impact, and any thoughts about, you know, thinking about impact from the beginning of the in pre-production?
Sure, I'll jump in. I mean, so like I said in the intro, I usually try to focus on character first and think about, well, what's going to be the strongest arc that an audience can connect to, and sort of what are the universal themes that can bring out and have people, really latch onto from an emotional standpoint. That being said, The Bitter Pill is probably the most issue-driven film I've ever done, and so as we started the preliminary shooting and going into this community in West Virginia and going into doing interviews with our main subject, Paul, it was pretty organic that part of their process was trying to figure out what are some solutions to where, if they did ever get relief from these companies that they were suing to try to get some money, where would that go? And you know, in legal parlance, it's sort of, what's the abatement plan? But in what ways can you make a real difference in the community? And so it was, for us, fairly organic to think about, just be taking notes mentally as the production was going on of, well, in what way could this be useful as a part of the conversation as the movie's coming out? These people are trying to literally figure out where money would go and how to create programs. And so we're filming these conversations between the lawyers and city council or fire chief, EMS workers, and it just, little mental notes for us of like, in almost any community where we could show this film, I think these kinds of conversations could be had, or these people could be incorporated into having those conversations around the film to see where this particular community needs help the most. So, we're very early on in this is our world premiere, and we have not solidified our impact campaign, whether we even have one or not, but it's something that we've thought about throughout the 7 years of making the film. It's just now that we start to roll it out and see what that looks like. We're playing it by ear a little bit.
I definitely think you're thinking about it from even just applying for grants. I think, you sort of have to describe your funding and your distribution, or at least your ideas for distribution, and what you're thinking just to apply for a lot of these grants. And I think especially remember when we were applying for public media funding, I would say that is the overall majority funding partner we have is through CPB, Corporation for Public Broadcasting. And so I don't think it guarantees a television broadcast, but that's the idea, is that it would be on television. And then so you think, okay, then that will reach potentially a lot of Asian American families that maybe don't go to the cinema, don't go to film festivals, but have access to public television. So I think that was an exciting idea and something you're already thinking about at the funding stage. And then I had another thought, but I lost it. If I think about it.
Yeah, I also want to bring up, Jennifer, maybe you can share this, like, talking about Family Tree, where you are with your impact and how that, what stage you're at, but also you were one of the producers for Who Streets, and y'all had a pretty successful, like, impact campaign, and there was just so much impact-driven work that was done with that film too, so if you want to touch on that as well.
So for Family Tree, I mean, honestly, I didn't think about impact at all. I don't want to be a jerk about it, but honestly, I just did not. What I really was thinking about was the families and the story, and how could I make something that I felt was so important, and yet so, like, not on the radar of anyone, and maybe no one would really care about at all, in the vast scheme of what's happening in daily life. And all the ways that our attention are pulled in different ways. You know, so how do you just craft a story that can hold people's attention and get them excited and interested in something that is very important to their future, but they may not know it yet? You know, forestry is going to be one of the main jobs of the future. Like, real talk, we are going to have to learn how to steward our resources in real, tangible ways. A lot more people are gonna have to go into those kinds of industries and not this other BS that runs our world right now, because we're gonna get to a point where we're gonna start losing resources, and we're gonna need to figure out how to salvage what we have and build on that. And so people need to learn these skills now, and we need to help them, one, understand what it is, why they should care about it, and to feel an emotional connection, you know, so that they can be invested when somebody does come along and wants to do something brilliant with my film in a classroom or something. All I can do is make a story that can, as you said, be universal and help transcend the boundaries that we have right now in between us, and think about what we share. That's the most important thing, is our planet, like where we live. Real talk.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I'm gonna come back to you, Vicky. I think about, like, so I think, also, sorry, Jennifer, you were saying, like, you didn't think about impact, but when you say that, I think you were referring to, like, how we understand impact in the industry, right?
I
So
was
it's
being
like,
a little bit of a smartass.
yeah, so it's like, you know, generally think about there is a social justice issue, and how can the film be a tool to make, like, whether policy change or some kind of, you know, tangible change through an impact strategy or impact campaign. But I think it's like disrupting that definition of impact also, as you were mentioning to me, like, as one of the audiences came up to you and said that this is the first film that I chose to watch, right? And that for you was impact, right? So there's also this, like, what is your vision of impact? What was the vision of impact for the participants in the film, and not necessarily, like, you know, how that issue is seen in society, or, you know?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think and I don't want to take up all the time on this panel, so I'll try to be quick here, but I think for us, we wanted to tell an authentic story about a slice of Black life that is poorly understood outside of, you know, very local Southern communities, and maybe even then not well understood. And to tell a very human story that would get people engaged in a topic that is undervalued but is still critically important to our future, as I said earlier. And, like, you know, support these families, help them. There's a record of their existence now. We're talking about families who 90% of African American held land in this country has been taken from us over the last 100 years. These people are magical unicorns. One of these families have had their land for 100 years. Like, that's incredible. So, like, just to show people that it's possible and that there are ways to do it, that in itself. So people have to see the film, it has to be seen in community with each other. Cinema is a communal experience. I don't want to channel my man, what's his name, who's been going on about this, and all the Marvel people got mad at him.
Scorsese.
Yeah, but real talk, like, it's about being in an embodied experience, watching something together, art, protons and neutrons bouncing off of each other, and like the feeling that you get when you start to laugh and then the person next to you starts laughing and everyone's laughing and you're like, oh, this is funny. You know, like, you can't get that at home watching Netflix, y'all. So we have to save this. That's the impact.
Yeah, so I also think about, you know, personal documentaries are very much, I feel like, kind of, generally, like, not films that get funded as easily as, you know, issue-based films. And I think it's also, like, we're still trying to figure out what impact for each personal documentaries, I think, looks differently also. And I know in general, like, when we're, like, there is I shared this with you, Vicky, earlier, that, like, when we think about the difference between distribution and impact, like, in distribution, we're thinking about how many people we can reach through the film, but and we're thinking about, like, but in impact, when we're thinking about impact campaign, we're thinking about who are the most passionate audiences, right? It's not about, like, thousands of people coming to the theater, but more, there could be 10 people that are passionate about the issue so they can walk out and take action, right? So I think about that in relation to personal documentaries, like, who would you say for your film? And if you can also talk a little bit about your film, the plot, so folks can kind of connect with it. Who would you say, like, you would envision the most passionate audience for a film like yours?
That's a great.
Or how do you decide that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's the second generation, so the children of immigrant parents. I think particularly of Asian descent, and sort of dealing with what it means to have, I think, a family history of diaspora, of cultural loss, often language loss is huge. The ability to just talk to each other. The cultural barriers as well, if you're born and raised in the West, compared to your parents or grandparents. Also a lot of silence and repression just from war that sort of goes unsaid, right? And what was the other part of your question?
Do you mind actually also sharing
A little bit about
the film? Yeah.
Sure. It's kind of this. There's like a lot to it, and I feel like I'm still learning how to articulate it. But it is like a 7 to 8 year personal journey I've been on. I think exploring how the mental health of individuals within my family sort of stemmed from a greater unknown history that my parents and grandparents experienced basically since the Chinese Civil War of 1949. And when that happened, my grandparents lost their families. They immigrated to Taiwan, basically as refugees. And then my parents eventually immigrated to the West. So also this idea of like existing in 3 countries over 3 generations. And sort of, again, the loss that happens because of that.
Cool. So given like sort of, I'm curious where you guys at in terms of thinking about impact and the passionate audiences that you named. Like, what does it look like for them to, I guess, like, are they for them to like make the impact that you were looking for that community?
Like potentially what it could look like, that impact.
Exactly, yeah.
I think in a sort of the dream, I think would be healing you know, I think especially intergenerational healing. But I think if you can even begin a conversation or think of acceptance and understanding, perhaps like the silence in your family, or the silence, or maybe things that culturally you just don't agree with. Things you might even consider to be like basically unprocessed trauma within your family. And I think learning how to accept that just a little bit more, starting conversations within your family of acceptance and understanding, and maybe, yeah, I guess like accepting what's possible.
Yeah, and that's huge, right? I have seen like many, there are like campaigns out there where there has been like healing circles and, you know, different like very creative ways folks have, you know, like I guess strategized and designed how those processes can be facilitated for the communities. So I'm really excited to see what you all come up with. Clay, I'm curious, like, as you all think about if there will be an impact campaign or like what it could look like for the bitter pill, how do you like, I guess, envision that for the story that you guys have crafted based on that, like, how does, like from here on, how could the impact that you're looking for, you could achieve? Yeah.
Well, I mean, just to what you said a minute ago about who are the most vocal people, not trying to reach everybody, but like who are the most passionate. And I guess I would say at a like 30,000 foot level, one of the things I love about documentary filmmaking is I think in order to be good at it, you have to be very sensitive and a very good listener. So throughout every part of the process, it's true in editing, you need to be listening to what the footage and the story is telling you. I think a little bit of the same way that, you know, in the thinking about an impact campaign is the same. The last time I was here, I made a movie called Gleason about a football player who had ALS and was diagnosed at the same time that his wife was pregnant with their first child. Now I had, his wife, Michelle, was barely a part of the story as we were putting it together, but more and more throughout the post-process, she became the heroine of the movie and her caretaking process. And so, you know, by the time we were premiering the film, it became very apparent through our feedback sessions as we were editing, people really took to her story and the sense of like nurses and caretakers. And I use that as a tangent for just like with the bitter pill. As we were listening and talking and doing all the interviews over the course of our many years of filming, you know, our protagonist kept saying over and over again, like, I'm just here for transparency and accountability. That's what I want. And so if we can in some way build something that sheds some light on that has that as our sort of core tenets, and you know, there's like a thing that he is going for through the whole movie is to get this data of where did these companies ship their pills, and want to know almost from the exact, all the way from the pill to the day to the street number of where every pill in America went. And not to ruin the movie, he gets that data. And so now we would have access to it to be able to put it up on our website or something, so anyone in America could see where did all these 100 billion pills go. That's just something that, you know, you can put in your brain and can be a part of many different conversations. So yeah, again, I sort of relate it back to the bigger idea of just listening and seeing what fits your movie.
Let's talk a little bit about community care. I feel like it kind of comes hand in hand with, as you were thinking about impact, whether it's the folks that are impacted that are watching the film or the people who are in the film. So like for both of you, that, you know, you're working with your family or working with a certain community, what did community care look like for you all? For production or just in terms of like, you know, for them to like protecting them or making sure the care they have as they're revisiting some of the traumatic things.
First, I just want to be clear, like, I like Netflix. I have no problems with Netflix. If Netflix wants to buy my movie, I would be so down with that if anybody in here knows anybody from Netflix. So, no, but seriously, on a serious note, you know, listening really is the core, because it is our job. That's like what we're supposed to, that's what we do. And if you apply that as a value across the board, you automatically are able to really do the work and partner with the families so that you're taking good care. You know, I think, you know, Nikki and I still talk pretty regularly. We text all the time, you know, same with Tyrone. We are still in conversation with each other. Like, I showed a clip of the film to Tyrone's family for Thanksgiving last year. You know, so it's accountability to the people that you are partnering with to make the film. Like, they are making the film with you, everyone. It's like, filmmaking is a team sport. There's this fantasy around like the auteur director, and yeah, it is my vision. It's true. It's my vision. But, you know, it took all these people to make it a reality, and when you respect that process and you respect everyone's contribution, like, you can really be in community in a real way that then extends outside and beyond, you know, where we were able to get the partner organization to get bulk tickets to be able to buy for the landowner families to come see and be at the festival tonight, or last night. And, you know, they may not have been regular audiences for a full frame film festival. So we were also able maybe to, you know, do some audience development for the full frame film festival. You know, like, you can, you know what I'm saying? Like, there's ways you can think about this community care in a really smart and savvy way if you understand what everybody's needs are and you keep that in mind with your strategy. If you listen.
Yeah, I'll just say too, there were so many overdoses in Huntington, West Virginia, where the story takes place when we started filming, that it was being known as like the overdose capital of the country. And so all of the EMT workers were starting to get really upset and pissed off that these film crews would come from all over the world to be like, America's opioid problem, and you know, look at all these people. And to the point where some of the camera crews were getting in the way of the services that people were needed to be having their lives saved. And so when we started, we had like one ride along, and then we started to hear that the workers in the community were starting to feel really anxious and pissed off about all these cameras coming in for the last, 18 months. And so we were like, all right, no more. We're not gonna, and you know, we can find a way to tell this story without having to do that, because this community is giving us pretty clear feedback, you know? So again, it's like listening to the community, hearing what they're saying, involving them in that conversation of what your access is, what people are comfortable with.
Yeah, I think it's community care. It's interesting. So of course, like with my family, it was always, I had to make sure that everyone was okay with the idea of a story about my family and how we were affected by basically the repercussions of war, like intergenerational trauma. And it's really difficult because especially in sort of East Asian cultures, it's tough to sort of put your private challenges so public. That's one aspect. The other thing is just we just weren't used to talking about these things possibly ever. So getting everyone sort of on board with the idea, and then of course taking it sort of shoot by shoot, you know, and conversation by conversation. We could always stop at any time. We were always asking whether the next day was okay. And all of that was great. It was some of like the most moving experiences of my life, basically, being able to share these conversations with my family. And I think the camera was able to open up so much and give us all a reason to meet, whereas family, I was meeting in Taiwan, China, Toronto, it would have been really hard, I think, to find reasons for us all to come together. But I was basically able to visit them multiple times a year for the last, 5 or 6 years. And the challenging part is, of course, the edit. And so once we actually have the story together, okay, this is actually the story I'm trying to tell, and now it's physical. And everyone watching it, and of course in family dynamics it's really difficult because not necessarily everyone agrees with your version of the story. And even siblings can have like very different experiences of what their families were like. So then sort of how do you deal with that contradiction? And of course if my family had issues with scenes or lines, we just took it out. But there was a bigger conversation of, whether my parents understand the film, I don't know. Like, they're proud of me, of course. They're proud that, it was funded, that it's playing at film festivals, and it's about us, But I don't actually know if it's totally understood. On the other hand, okay, maybe it's a document of, my cousin's wedding, my mom's first trip to Taiwan in 30 years. In which case, I think it's still really beautiful. I'm hoping sort of the next phase is, they didn't come to this festival, but they will come to more local ones, like in New Jersey, New York, that they get to experience, I think, the audience reaction is what I'm really excited for. And I'm curious how that will happen.
Yeah, and thanks for sharing that. I feel like these challenges are so real, especially the cultural things you mentioned, and with personal documentaries and navigating that in the layer of community care. And I think in your case, it's also so important to, how do you care for yourself, right? How does self-care look like? As that dynamic, but also your positionality as a filmmaker, and maybe the power you bring in that way, but then also the distance that you have from the way they were exposed to the trauma versus you were, right? And how much can you push, and yeah, so I think also y'all, what Clay and Jennifer shared, I think there is so much disruption in the process of filmmaking as you were thinking about impact, because y'all are centering the participants, right? Whether it's listening to them, whether it's making sure that they're comfortable, whether, who is the audience, are the participants able to be the audience for their own films, right? That's also it's not, the care just doesn't stop during production, right? And building those relationships and
that's
trust.
really about framing when you're talking, when you want to translate that into a pre-production,
right.
What is that, where do you begin that process? And that's around a framing question, right?
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Did you want to share something? But yeah, also in Clay, what you were mentioning, I think generally, especially when you're doing big issue films, you can't help it but kind of think about oh, what do I need for the story? Centering the story to making sure that it's making I don't know, you're catering to a bigger impact, right? But within that, how do you center the people who are in the film, right?
Yeah, I think my brain is kind of, unfortunately for my sales agent, the reverse. So that I'm thinking sort of from that more insular point of view to try to build outward. But I admit that the opioid crisis as an umbrella of a topic is huge and affects so many people, the statistics are crazy. 600,000 people over the last 10 years or something like that. It's a lot. So I tried to focus on what is going to be the emotional trajectory, the arc of the protagonist that you're going to, like I said, that you're going to connect to, and trying to see where we can, what are the boundaries? That's kind of what test screenings are for me too. Or what are the boundaries of how far can I lean away from that for just a second to maybe get another part of the issue in, while also keeping you on track with our main character's journey here. and saying, well, it's worth it for this 2-minute little tangent to talk about the different kinds of companies that were doing different kinds of things and that maybe aren't just in this lawsuit. Or we had a big conversation in our internal film team, a lot of like, everybody knows the Sackler family. It's the most salacious part of the opioid epidemic. It's like they're the Succession style evil family that started this all. And part of that is definitely true, but these other companies made exponentially more money than they did off of the exact same problem and distributing the exact same pills. So how do you acknowledge them and bring that part of the story into your film, and but not let it overshadow? You know, like we're mainly profiling these nameless, faceless companies versus a family. It's just more, it almost makes my point for me, like you connect to people. You're not going to connect to an idea or an abstract company or thought as much. So I was like battling my own like mission statement there.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say one thing, like, I would love for us to start having conversations about the impact that this has on the filmmaker. How does this help the artistry of filmmaking? How does this help the actual artist thrive as a filmmaker? Like, we don't talk about any of those kinds of things. If we're talking about an ecosystem that supports all of this kind of work and how we think about the work and how we distribute the work, like, at its core, there are a lot of filmmakers out there that, you know, struggle to do this on a high level. You know, it's not easy in America versus Europe, for example, where I just came from CPH docs and it was like, okay, yeah, I forgot that. The government invests, you know? It's like, we don't, I mean, yes, I love you, PBS. Sorry. But you know what I mean? Like, it's a totally different playing field, and I would love us to be thinking about in real, tangible, meaningful ways at this time of disruption in our industry. How do we ensure that the people who actually make the things that we all want to watch can do it sustainably?
What do you
Sustainability.
do you want to share more about it? Like, what does that look like for you?
I have no idea, man. I just premiered this. I mean, I basically, really, it's like I shot my shot. Like, last night was my premiere, and I hope that people would really love it, and it would do something for the community and all those things, but also for my career, that people could see, you know, I'm not so bad at this, you know, and that you hope that you will get other opportunities from that. And I just want that reality of this conversation to be in here, because, you know,
Yeah, absolutely.
it's also self-care. This is a part of the self-care.
Sure, yeah. And you know, I think so much of the process y'all are talking about is like so much collaboration, right? Just steering away from the term subject to like participants. Like, how are the folks whose stories we're telling are actually have a participatory role in the film, and that takes whole nother like level of labor that has not been ever existed, right? Because just the amount of intentionality, whether it's like your positionality and how do you navigate, you know, the power dynamic of you as a filmmaker or participants. Anyways, all of these intentionality, I think, not just requires support like monetarily for you to be able to have more time to do that. Because one of the things I also feel that when impact conversation became sort of like this buzzword in the industry, and we're trying to push against extractive storytelling practices, like part of centering the participants is like sharing your rough cut with the participants, right? There are some tangible actions you need to take to like turn this intentionality into like making sure that there are this relationship, right? And so sometimes that argument is like, we don't have that much time. We're working under so many deadlines, funding deadlines, distribution deadlines, release deadlines, right? And so like, I feel that challenge, there's so many challenges you're overcoming by committing to centering impact in your film or having a vision for impact for your film. So like, whether it's like funders, think about understanding the value of impact, right? Value of this type of process, value of the labor that you're putting in. All gatekeepers in the industry to understand that, right? To be able to provide the support that you need.
I think they're asking us to get off the stage. Are we good? Are we good? Okay. I was just looking like, are we still okay?
So we will have 15 minutes for Q&A, and we're not there yet, but we have a couple more minutes. Go for that.
Am I answering this question?
Go for it.
I'm sorry, so just rephrase that, like just a quick, I'm sorry, I was like
That's
following
okay.
you and then
That's okay. I was just drawing the point that in the industry, all the gatekeepers need to understand the value of this elaborative, intentional process when you are centering impact, when you are centering participants, which is not a process of filmmaking that has existed in the past. So when you are doing that, the additional support that filmmakers need, like you mentioned, whether it's self-care, whether it's additional monetary support, yeah.
I have a thing to say on that. I mean, as I've watched more money get thrown into the space from like 2014 on, I think that now money's being taken out of the space a little bit,
Yeah.
but there was this influx of attention and money, and with more money comes more problems, and I think with that is a series of like, that money came with more strings. People wanted more sure bets. They wanted tighter timelines. They wanted things. So I saw the documentary space being treated more like, reality television, for lack of a better term, and that to me stripped out a lot of the time and empathy and pathos it takes in order to engage with these participants and storylines in a way that is, I think, more grounded. And so I think that this is just my own personal observation, I'm seeing the stories that were able to still do that despite the times over the last several years get more attention again. And I think but it's been this like a real challenge for the industry, where you're like, oh my gosh, I've got all this budget, and great, but now I have a shorter time to make it. They're just telling me to throw more people at the problem, and it's not necessarily helping the way in which the story is being told.
yes, amen to that. I kind of have a little bit of I don't know, it's funny, this industry and sort of these practices around, audience development, outreach, engagement, impact, whatever you want to call these things, and they do have different meanings, but I'm being a little cheeky. But, honestly, like, you're never going to get all of the gatekeepers to understand these things. Like, I literally worked for a decade with, these foundation organizations like Grantmakers in Film and Electronic Media, that's now Media Impact Funders. Like, a lot of these spaces where there was a push for quantifying, how impact with data and like using dashboards and all these things. Like, I went through all of those iterations. And the reality is, like, you don't have any control over what happens with the film after it's out of your hands. You don't know how people are going to respond. It's art. It's an emotional, subjective response. All you can do is tell the best story possible that is most authentic to the people who are participating in it, gives them something that helps grow, not extractive storytelling, but helps grow the people who've supported it and are a part of it and participated in it. And gives audiences, entertains them, but gives them something to think about. Like, you can't, people are dealing with a million different things in their life. You think about this, sometimes you meet someone or you see a friend you haven't seen for a minute and they're in a stank mood and you're just like, oh, was it this thing that I did? And no, they're just thinking about the shitty morning they had. And that's sort of what you're up against when you start to have these conversations about the impact my film's gonna have. You don't know what people are dealing with. All you can do is be a great artist and do the thing that art does, which is transform people's brains and get them to see the world in a different way, just for a moment. And then boom, other opportunities for different thoughts are there. That's it.
Do you have any thoughts, Vicky?
I mean, I agree with that. Like Jennifer, like if I'm just thinking about the impact I want the film to have, it's like the way I felt when I watched, my first Edward Yang film, or and that sent me on a whole journey of like understanding what it was like for my dad to grow up in martial law Taiwan during like the 50s and 60s, and that is, it's funny, I don't know why I feel like a little hesitant to say that that's enough, but like it should, it's already so much.
Because we still want that money, yo. I mean, seriously, we would love to do these campaigns. So we're not saying they're bad or they're not useful, but we're trying to temper the expectations. Maybe that's what this conversation should be called. Let's temper the expectations.
I think it's a good time to segue. Any questions from the audience? Yes. Is there a mic? Okay, so there's a mic coming.
Earlier, y'all touched on boundaries and boundaries between your subjects and the stuff that y'all film. How do y'all find a balance between what people are comfortable with you filming and pushing some boundaries uncomfortably against that? Just get what you need for your film.
I mean, that's something you deal with on a second-to-second basis when you're making a movie out in the field. And it's like, that's why you constantly have to be reading the room. You have to be this sort of sensitive antenna to and know as much context as you can to the person and their story that you're telling. Maybe I can push this person a little bit to they're giving me a very deflective answer in an interview, or as I'm getting a tour of their house for an hour. But I know that if I keep prodding, I can get that, and it's not going to be traumatic for them. I'll give you an example that I just dealt with. So I'm making a movie about Damar Hamlin, the football player who had a cardiac arrest for the Bills. And it's been really hard for him to talk about what happened on that exact night. And I knew that I only had one opportunity to do that. I mean, we talked at length, the two of us, about what it's like for him to interact with the world in which everyone's coming up to him and wanting to relive their version of that moment to him. And so here I am telling his story and being like, hey, can you do that again? On camera? And so I had to have a lot of conversations with him in order to be like, when are you ready to do that? And only then can we have that conversation. So to me, it's really communicating and being sensitive.
That's intense. Because you don't want to be triggering the person, right? Like the whole thing is you want to be able to, I know for me with the families, and I know you're dealing with super personal stuff, but I got to be sort of one step removed with these families who were in therapy together. And that sort of conversations, that were being had about bringing the camera in or not, I would be like, yeah, we'll do it. And then I was like, oh no, we shouldn't do it. Yeah, we'll do it. No, we shouldn't do it. Yeah. And finally Nikki was like, you're going to do this. She was just like, come on, and I was like, okay. I was the one who was, and I was making it about me. And I had to take a moment and pause and be like, this is for them. If this is what they want, then this is what I'm gonna do, and I'm gonna do it with the utmost respect and care. And we were all in the room together with Sydney and just sat there for 45 minutes and let him process. I think he said something else like, I prayed all night to God last night to give me the courage to be honest with you today, something like that. I mean, when you're in the room and somebody says something like that to you, so that's like having that sensitivity, being like, okay, I'm holding space for somebody else, and this is not about me right now.
And also, I think about honesty about the process, because I think a lot of the times, like when we're not centering the participants, and in our head, we have the director's hat on, we are so caught up with like, this is my process, and I need to like separate the participants from it, right? Like not let them enter, and that like obviously like that creates that like not honest communication about your process. So I don't know, that's kind of what showed up for me when you asked that question. Did you want to add something?
I'll also just quickly add, I think, don't hesitate to ask. Like, just can we talk about this? Like, maybe it's not your first question. Maybe you slowly build trust up there, and you sort of ask just a little bit like how they grew up or where they're, I don't totally know, but what your subject you're thinking of, but like you start there, and then maybe you can ask that question. But I think sometimes maybe the fear we can build in our mind, or like the projections we can have, because maybe it's our own insecurity, is not necessarily someone else's. But then you also don't know what their sort of like trigger points could be. But I think that's just like when you're trying to talk to another human being, like these are the things that are gonna happen.
There are a couple of questions here.
How do you all approach deadlines, and how do you maintain the deadline knowing that the story could go any kind of way and it could potentially add more time to like what you need to do?
Never listen to it, no.
Push it. I mean, sometimes you do have to push it. But, so, we made our film in 2 years, and we made it with 22 shoot days. And if anybody knows, that's not a lot of time to get a film like this. So we had to have a really structured approach, but also the kind of approach where you're in such a relationship with the participant that they're really driving the story in a certain kind of way. So like, I always knew the frame of this was gonna be around the 4 seasons and the life cycle of a tree. Like that was going to be just a metaphorical and visual sort of thing that we were gonna start with. And then I wanted to connect, Black cultural ways around the seasons and events. So our Thanksgiving type of events, and then like the cookout that we do in summertime, like that's something that happens across many Black families, no matter where we live in the United States, but what does it look like in rural communities, and just, so those were always gonna be sort of the tent poles, but then it's just then allowing the people in the film to tell you how far they want you to go with them. How deep can we go? That's the listening. Like where are you gonna take me? Where are you willing to go with the camera? And then that's the process of listening, and really deep, and having an incredible camera crew that's like hidden in the room where they just don't even know you're there, capturing these moments because of the tenderness with which they do their work. So it's like it's everything. It's the whole process.
I'll reference the new name for this panel again, which is expectations. And so, like, in terms of deadlines, I think for me, I always approach any deadline that I have with trying to communicate to whoever it is, a financier, producing partner, an audience at a test screening, an editor, a DP. What is the expectation that we collectively have so that we all know when we hit that deadline what we should be thinking about? And like, for example, having a rough cut screening when you're 2 weeks away from locking picture and you're just like, hey everybody, love some notes. You're gonna get a lot of big notes that are not gonna be able to be done and are gonna spin your head out with 2 weeks before you have to lock picture. And so trying to, just really, it's a mantra that I have and preach all the time on various projects of just setting expectations, and I think it applies to deadlines a lot.
Other questions? Yes.
I can speak loud. Clay, my question is for you. So at the end of your documentary, you say that there's a website that you want people to visit after viewing. Is there a goal that either you or the participants of the film have once people view the website? Are there any tangible actions that you want people to take?
Well, I mean, I don't think we're ever going to put a website at the end of the film, but I think in terms of possibly creating a website that is in relation to the film for some sort of impact campaign, I think that, you know, at the end of our film, there's our main protagonist got about 50 some odd billion dollars worth of settlements all across America in relation to these cases. And I think now what is sort of part of our movie, and I think something that people can tangibly follow up on, is where's that money going in your particular county? Who are the people that I can contact? You know, I think that like Paul was very specifically motivated by Obama's like community problems require community solutions. So I'm going to sue these companies on behalf of individual counties, not on a grander scale, because the people that need to be actually creating these, you know, getting this money and putting it into direct action as soon as possible are the city governments themselves. And so now there's been that windfall of money, where is it going? Now people are going to be, and they are already, fighting over it. And so I would love to be able to have some sort of way that you could look at, you know, okay, here's my particular home county, who can I call to figure out and get an answer on where that's going? When's it coming in? Where's it going? Like, that's not something that any government official ever wants to answer, but you can ask it.
I think we have time for one more question. There is one. Yes.
Really quickly, when we're telling the stories of different places and people that have historically been marginalized and extracted from, how do we as filmmakers prevent our projects from backsliding into reinforcing the legacies of exploitation and extractivism?
I can share. I mean, that's that is so important, right? I think for me, it's committing to these values, right? I think a lot of it is understanding the root causes of where those practices came from, right? Who are benefiting from those practices, So, I mean, what was the goal for those practices? So whether it's like, just in general, like racism is like certain people benefiting from racism existing in the world, right? So similarly, I think when your goal changes, when you are, for instance, just that little shift of like, not thinking about your story as a product, but thinking about that I have the privilege and the honor of like being the storyteller for someone else's story, right? They're sharing their story. So like I think a lot of mind shift from how in extractive storytelling practices, where that like framework of thinking, filmmaking process came from, like shifting that, and the more we talk about it, the more we understand how it what are the different nuances of how it needs to shift. And so I think in a lot of impact conversations, we are bringing up those nuances of like, how do we center, we never thought about like going into someone's house and using their electricity to interview them, but like we're never paying them for their time. We're never paying them for the electricity that we're using in their house, right? So, but the mind shift here is, we need to think about these people who are sharing their stories with us. We need to care about them. So when you do that, I think that just manifests in like every single steps of the filmmaking process. I don't know if that answers your question, but I think it's really like, when you know like what your goal is and what do you want to center, what do you want to prioritize, who needs to be prioritized, who needs to be centered, and not that, oh, I need to get my film at Sundance and I need to like win this awards, and working backward from there. Obviously you are going to constantly think about it in a selfish way or in entitled way or something, but when your final goal is that, okay, I want this social change, or I want the folks who are sharing their stories for them to like have the impact that they need through how this story can help as a tool, and working backward from there. That's just how my brain works. So yeah, I don't know if that's helpful. We are at the end of the panel. I want to give just a couple of minutes to share if y'all want to share anything about that question.
I don't really think, I don't know. It's for the audience to judge. You can't know if you're not doing the thing until somebody tells you. Like, how do you know? I mean, you can try to figure it out while you're making the film. But I think that's what she's talking about. But I also think that, like, on a certain level, there isn't a way to know. All you can do is just, like, again, tell the most authentic story possible. Listen to your people, participate with them, allow them to take you as far as they want to go. Don't push, but push,
Thank you everyone so much. Thanks everyone for participating and listening. Thank you for this platform to have this conversation.
Thank you so much. Have a very good evening and enjoy the rest of the festival.
Yeah.